Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're going to be making a jig for your drill press table to drill round objects. Well, there's been a few times in my woodworking days that I've had to drill a sphere, whether it be made of wood or some other material. It really doesn't matter, but it's always been a problem. It's always hard to hold it on the drill press. How do you know you're getting it squarely down through the sphere without it rotating and twisting or going in crooked? And today we're going to be making a jig for that, as I said in the intro. What we're going to be drilling is a standard 2 1/4 inch billiard ball. And basically, the materials that we're going to need is some 3/4 inch ply, some 3-inch quarter 20 bolts, and some wing nuts and some washers. It's a really simple jig, and we're going to get started by cutting some squares of 3/4 inch ply, 4 inches by 4 inches. We're going to need 2 of those. We've got our 2 squares, 3/4 inch thick, 4 inches by 4 inches. And the next step that you want to do is find the center of each of these pieces. And the easiest way to do that, of course, is to draw a line from corner to corner. But when you draw that line, don't just mark it in the middle of the block. Actually draw it from corner to corner, because we're going to need to drill some holes on the outside corners, and that line will be our guide as to where we want to draw them. So on each of the pieces, a pencil line from corner, line up your ruler on the opposite corners, and then corner to corner you want to draw to get your center. So do that on both pieces, and then you'll be ready for the next step. The next step in our jig making procedure is to mark a line from the corner in along these diagonal lines that you've drawn 5/8 of an inch on each of the 4 corners on both pieces. So I'm going to use my Incra rule for that, because you know how much I love this thing. So 5/8 of an inch in on each one of these corners. And once you get all those marked, you're going to be drilling a 5/16 inch hole down through each one of these 8 marks that you've just put on there. You want to punch the 4 marks that you've done to help your bit be guided through there, and as well punch the center. And with a 5/16 drill bit installed in the drill press, we're going to go ahead and drill the 4 corner holes in each of these pieces. I've set up my fence so that it's a little easier to line up the holes. And for this particular operation, guys, you don't want to forget your backer board. Give you a little bit of a hand or help to prevent your tear out on the back. It is plywood, and it will tear out quite easily. So a backer board and a fence will go a long way to helping you get all of these holes in the right position. I just want to point something out here, and it was an error on my part, but because I had the fence set up the fence actually showed me that I was wrong before I drilled it. And what we've got here is, this is my mark with the pencil line where I punched it to drill the 5/16 inch hole. Now, because I had the fence set up for a repetitious depth in from this side to drill, I don't know if you can see that, but right there is where the brad point bit punched. And as soon as I saw that, of course, I stopped drilling and then took a measurement. And sure enough, that mark is 5/8. I accidentally marked at 1/2 inch. So 2 lessons here. Double check and wear your glasses in the shop so you can see what the heck you're doing. Anyway, I'm going to carry on drilling. At this point in time, you've got all 8 holes drilled in the corners, 5/16 of an inch. And now what you want to do is you want to drill a through hole in the middle that's just a little less than the sphere or ball that you're drilling. In this particular case, the 8 ball that I'll be drilling is 2 1/4 inches. So I've chosen a 1 3/4 inch Forstner bit to get my through hole. Again, I've got my fence set up to help me duplicate the proper measurements. So we're just going to go ahead and drill our through hole. And with all of our holes drilled now, we're just going to give it a light sanding with the oscillating sander, and then some hand sanding just inside the ring and the edges of these larger 1 3/4 inch holes. The last step in the actual drilling, or whatever you want to call it, of this particular jig is on one of the pieces, on all 4 of these outside holes, you want to countersink them so that when we put our 3-inch bolts through, the head of the bolt is inside the board and not protruding out, sitting flush. So you want to countersink these in. Because I'm using 1/4 bolts, I'm using a Forstner bit to countersink these holes, and I've set my fence once again to assist me in getting the holes in the correct positions. All the work on the jig is done, and now I'm just going to show you how it goes together. The 4 bolts go down in through your countersunk holes, and this actually is the bottom of the jig. Once you get the 4 bolts in, flip it over so that you have this kind of configuration. There is some play. These are 1/4 inch bolts, 3 inches long with a 1/4 20 thread. There's some play because we drilled a 5/16 hole, and we did that on purpose because we do want a little bit of play in there. The next thing you want to do is you want to place whatever object that you're drilling into the jig, and it sits in that little circle that you drilled. Now the second piece goes on top, and you just line up your 1/4 20 bolts and let them protrude through the 5/16 inch holes. Just like that. And of course, once you get them protruded, you put some 1/4-inch washers on there. I checked in some of my hardware and I was looking for smaller washers, but this was really all I had on hand. And then you take your 1/4-20 wing nuts and you just want to spin them onto here, onto each bolt, and tighten them down. And the object here now is to sandwich that ball, in this case, like I said, the billiard ball, in between these two pieces. So you want to crank these down until your ball is firmly held between the two sandwich pieces. Once we get this cranked down, we're going to head over to the drill press and I'll show you how easy it is to use this jig. One thing you want to make sure of while you're tightening these wing nuts is that you're doing it uniformly around the object so that you're tightening each one equally. You don't want this all lopsided. And it doesn't have to be perfectly square either. The object of this jig is to hold that ball in place while you're drilling it. But you'd still like a nice square area to hold it in place. So for this particular project, I need to drill right through the 8. So this circle as well here is your window to help you line up where it is that you want to drill. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and continue to make sure that this is all tight in here, and then once that's all done, I'll see you over at the drill press. Well, let's look at what we know here. What we know is that our jig is 4 inches by 4 inches. So in order to drill down through the center of our jig, we need to drill through the middle at 2 inches and then 2 inches in. So what I've done on just a scrap, I'll just see if I can show you that there, is I've drawn a mark 2 inches by 2 inches and marked where they cross. And I've brought down my Forstner bit into the center of that mark and kind of used it to hold the board there. Then I slid my fence forward and locked it down. So now we know we're drilling in the middle of 2 inches. Then, because it's lined up this way, I'm going to clamp a stop block down there, just like that, to my fence. And with this stop block in place, right at the edge, we know now that if I butt my jig up to that stop block and tight against the fence, that we will be drilling in the center of our ball. So there it is there with the stop block and the fence, and we'll just get our jig and place it in there, and you can see there that that drill bit is coming down into the center of that 8-ball. So with everything set now, we can go ahead and drill our object. Now, for this particular one here, I'm using a Forstner bit, and a pool ball is nothing more than a bunch of resin. So the Forstner bit should take it. I've set my depth stop, and now I will continue to drill through the ball for the depth that I require. Now the friction of the jig should hold the ball in place right where it is, and if not, of course, you can always just turn down those wing nuts just a little more. Because I'm drilling a billiard ball, of course, I'm going extremely slow and just letting the drill do its work. So I'm not going to sit here and bore you guys with the full drilling process, getting bored down through this billiard ball. So I'm going to finish this up and then I'll come back and see you. And there you have it. Cool little jig. If you should ever need to drill a sphere for any particular reason, it doesn't necessarily have to be a billiard ball, but any kind of sphere, a wooden sphere or what have you, They're hard as heck to drill. It's hard to keep them positioned onto the drill press, and as you could see from the video, this particular jig really does a great job of holding it in place. No other clamping was required. The jig held it. The fence and the stop block held the jig from spinning, and it did a great job. A nice square hole in this 8-ball, and that's going to go a long way to the project I need it for. So guys, build one yourself. Great little jig, easy to make, probably takes about 20 minutes all in all, unless you're filming, in which case it takes way longer than you ever thought it would. Guys, thanks for watching, and I'm going to see you again next week with yet another woodworking video.